The little window. Yeah, the little window. So where do I do that? From mute at the bottom? Yep. Yes, I've done that. Mute all. Okay, but now wait, how do I get the picture back again? Okay, got it. Okay, I thank you very much. We're all set to go. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Okay. It's all yours. It's all set. All set to go. Good. Okay. Okay, tov, everyone. Very good Erev Shabbat. There's a great lesson that is reflected in this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha is that of Yetziat Mitzrayim. The Jewish people are delivered from the bondage of Egypt. Yetziat Mitzrayim is the central fact in Jewish history. Everything that happened subsequently to that is Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim. We make Kiddush tonight to bring the Shabbat into our homes. It's Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim. Everything is a remembrance to the great miracle of Yetziat Mitzrayim. In fact, it is the one fact that makes us a people. The experience of millions of people, deliverance from bondage. So how do we commemorate that? That's the question that exists. How do you remember something that happened 3,335 years ago? When it's hard for us to remember what happened yesterday. How do we grant it significance? We see how the world generally struggles with this problem. There are many nations that mark their independence, that have special days. But all of these days are difficult to maintain. So that, for instance, in American life, the 4th of July, it's pretty much degenerated into a day of tire sales, sports events. There are very few Americans that read the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, which Jefferson intended to be the celebration. If you go to Washington, D.C. on July 4th, in front of the Jefferson Memorial, there's an actor that reads the Declaration of Independence. but it is not a national or popular thing. And in fact, we see in our time how the very people that brought us independence are being vilified and made into bad people because of certain current culture. Jefferson would be horrified, as would be anyone else over 60 years old, that his statue is removed from the New York City Hall, where it has been existed for 160 years. Because according to the mores of his time, wrong as they may have been, he doesn't fit into the current culture. So all nations face that problem. All civilizations. And one could say that those civilizations that have failed and disappeared did so because of the fact they could not maintain their original vision. They were corrupted either from the inside or the outside. They became something else, and eventually they collapsed. So the Torah is aware of human nature. So the Torah gave us a mitzvah to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim. But that mitzvah by itself would be of little worth 3,300 years later. Because who remembers Mitzrayim? Who remembers the Mankot? We don't remember them at all. It's not within our realm of experience, which at most goes back a century. But the Torah gave us the means by which we could remember as well. And that's a pattern in Jewish life. The means are simply that great events are remembered by performing mitzvot. The performance of the mitzvah creates the event again. Now, Yetzias Mitzrayim, that is this week's Parsha. So the Torah told us how to celebrate it. Matzah, moror, the children asking the questions. You don't commemorate it 1 day, 7 days. Surrounded by mitzvot. Pesach is coming. And even in the secular world that we live in, the observance of the Pesach Seder remains very ubiquitous in Jewish society. I saw, and I don't know how they come to these numbers, but that even more Jews observe the Seder than fasting on Yom Kippur. So that's a mitzvah. So the Torah gave us the means of remembrance by cloaking it in observance of religious ritual. If it's attached to a mitzvah, it will remain, because mitzvahs are eternal. So therefore, by eating the matzah, so that's holach ma'anya, right? This is the bread. We relive Mitzrayim. And that's the genius of how history is preserved. It's preserved by current mitzvot. And you'll see that that is true in every holiday that the Jewish people have. Ki basukot toshavti es bnei Yisrael motzeisi osam eretz Mitzrayim. So then we have to build a sukkah. It's a mitzvah to eat in the sukkah, to be in the sukkah. And the sukkah has halachas. What's a sukkah? It's a whole deal. And it's not enough to say, we sat in sukkahs. Or to show a film that shows us sitting in sukkahs. You have to experience the sukkah. That's what mitzvahs are. Mitzvahs are experiences, things that we do. And the same thing is true of Shavuos. There's a mitzvah of Bikurim. And we've transferred the mitzvah of learning Torah to Shavuos. That's the commemoration of Matan Torah. It's to stay up all night and learn Torah. And Rosh Hashanah is hearing the shofar. Yom Kippur is the fact that we don't eat. And Hanukkah is the fact that we light the candle. It isn't that we remember. Because if we had to remember it, it would long be forgotten. It's too old. Things have changed. Societies have moved on. So how do we remember Hanukkah? We remember it by lighting our menorah. I light my menorah, so then Hanukkah lives. It's attached to a mitzvah. It's bound to something that is eternal. And therefore it derives its own eternity and memory from the mitzvah that accompanies it. That's true of our tragedies as well. The 4 biblical fast days. Certainly the day of Tisha B'Av. We would not be here in an independent state of Israel, in my opinion, if there were no commemoration of Tisha B'Av. But it has halachot, it has mitzvot, so to speak, that bind it. It isn't the day of speeches or formal ceremony. It's a day of mitzvot. In fact, the rabbis made clear how we would mourn on that day. What would the methodology be? Because people are always groping to try and hold on to the infinite, but we don't have weapons of the infinite. So we have that in our time as an example. I don't mean to be critical at all. It's just the way things play out. Yom HaShoah. So Yom HaShoah should be the equivalent of Tisha B'Av, right? Commemorate millions of Jews destroyed for no reason except that they were Jewish. But we grapple with it because to a great extent, there's no religious significance to it. There's no mitzvah to it. Most, if not many of the rabbis, or many, if not most, say it's on the wrong day of the year. It shouldn't be that. And there is no mitzvah attached to it. There are ceremonies. But the ceremonies wane in their importance and import on people. So 80 years later, there are people that say already it's enough. Forget it. Most of the customers in the world for the Holocaust museums are non-Jewish schools. Jewish schools don't come. They moved on. Shouldn't dwell upon our troubles. No religious significance to it. And then you have the same thing with Yom HaTzmaut. The rebirth of the Jewish people in our time to have an independent state is certainly miraculous. It's certainly worthy of a religious commemoration. But we never found the tool to which that commemoration could be attached. So it became a day of controversy. Instead of a day of commemoration, it's a day of division. There's no unanimity what to do because it's not attached to a mitzvah. That is because of the fact that our generations do not have the authority nor the divine ability to be able to create mitzvahs anymore. And therefore, great events are like suspended in the air. No way to follow them up, no way to guarantee that they'll be remembered. So if Yom HaTzmaut becomes a day only of barbecues, eventually it has little chance of survival, a little chance of meaning. So as long as the generation that experienced it was still alive, that's one thing. But now there are generations later. And in the course of time, naturally, there'll be a greater distance in time and memory. So how will it be preserved? That's an issue, a very, very strong issue. And because of that, therefore, the absence of a mitzvah really cripples the commemoration of important events, miraculous events that has been experienced by the Jewish people in this past century. So then in this week's Parsha, we see that the mitzvah is what the Torah concentrates upon. The Torah tells us everything is going to be Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim, but everything has to be attached to a mitzvah. It's Zecher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim because we make Kiddush, because it's Shabbat. There's no Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim just that exists in the abstract or by itself, or is not attached to something that is eternal. The Gemara says, "Rotza Kodesh Baruch Hu l'zakos es Yisrael." The Rebbeinu Shalom wanted to give us merit. L'zakos is more than merit. He wanted to give us a gift. The gift of memory, which is the greatest gift. Because we know, Rachmana litzlan, when that gift is taken from us, well, there's no longer a human being present. So he brought Salazakos as Israel. He wanted to give us this great gift. How did he give it to us? Levicha chirba lahem Torah mitzvot. So he gave us a lot of mitzvot that would jar our memory, that would keep it fresh, that would make us an eternal people. And he attached to that the memory of Yetzias Mitzrayim. We read in the Parsha, Hayom atem yotzim b'chodesh Aviv. Today you're going out in the month of springtime. It should say, what do you mean today you're going out? It should say, Ethmol, yesterday you went out. 3,300 years ago you went out. What does it say? Hayom, today you went out. Because when we perform the mitzvahs today, it becomes immediate and relevant, takes on a different form. So it's not a commemoration of what was, it's a commemoration of what is. Yetzias Mitzrayim is an ongoing process. It's not just an historical event that once occurred to us. So everything is tied into that. The mitzvah of tefillin, Kriya Shema, we say Yetzias Mitzrayim in the 3 parshas, the 3rd parsha, tzitzis, all of the mitzvahs of the Torah attach themselves. And they do so in order to make Yetzias Mitzrayim real. That it's current. And we say that in the Pesach Haggadah. We all went out from Egypt, even though the Exodus took place over 3,300 years ago. Because we perform the mitzvah every time I eat the matzah, every time the grandchild asks the questions, every time we drink the cups of wine. So that's Yetzias Mitzrayim. Yeah, we are delivered from becoming stale, from being frozen in history. Instead, we become current and vital, and everything is now. That's what Torah mitzvahs does for us. So if it's not attached to Torah mitzvahs, we have problems. All nations, all humans search for commemoration. But in the long run, what was the commemoration of Rome or Greece or the German Empire or the Austrian Empire? What were their days of commemoration? No one remembers anymore. It's all gone. Just as I pointed out to you, even existing countries, their days of commemoration have warped into something else completely. almost just the opposite of what they were. But when it's attached to a mitzvah, then the day of commemoration not only survives, but is relevant. It's here today. It speaks to us. And that's what it says in the Parsha, Miyomim Yomimo. One day to the next. It's a continual process. Because it's not what was, it is, as I pointed out, what is. Moves forward. And if we're able to view events in that light, both personal events and national events, we view it in the light of mitzvot, of doing God's will, of being a special people. So then it has an eternity to it that cannot be lost. That remains for all time. It's what the Tanakh was called Tzror HaChaim, the bondage, the link of life. But a link of life is always eventually severed, but not really. Because memory can live on, achievements can live on, progeny can live on. So everything is included in the Tzor HaChaim. And mitzvahs are the methodology by which Tzor HaChaim operates. It's the fuel for the engine. So we should think of mitzvahs in that light, not as commandments, do this. That's true, but it has a much broader meaning than that. Mitzvahs is memory. Mitzvahs is what we once were and what we will be. Mitzvahs is what binds us together. And I think that that is the basic lesson of this week's Parsha. The Parsha is full of details, full of small understandings, but that the overall picture is to build for itself a world of eternity, of memory, that will eventually transform itself into a greater and better society. So have a great Shabbat, everyone, and thank you for coming. Stay warm and stay healthy.
Great shiur. Shabbat shalom. Good Shabbos.
Do many of the people know what that says behind you, that image?
Well,
Because
if anyone asks, we answer.
it says Shema Yisrael,
Right,
but a lot of people would just go right by it, you know?
right, yes, it takes some analysis.
I'm
Yes.
sorry?
It takes some analysis.
Well, that's what artists do. They put this information in a vision, in a visual way of communication. It's very beautiful.
Okay, Shabbat shalom.
As soon as I put this away, we can go.
Shabbat shalom.
I've got to get this recording off.